We talked about it earlier in the show. Baylor has a new quarterback on campus. His name is Luke Anthony. He was at Louisiana Tech by way of ACU. So this is the third stop for him in his college career, but he will become as a grad transfer walk-on. And Craig, the depth took a hit when Gary Bohannon left. I mean, that's it. There's not a lot of experience depth, and there's not a lot of – look, even if he stays, the question about depth and injuries, because both of them got hurt, within a game of each other last year, and Baylor had to navigate, would Gary Bohannon be healthy enough to play in the Sugar Bowl? Hamstrings aren't easy, and obviously he was, but played probably his worst game in a Baylor uniform in the Sugar Bowl, and even in spite of that, Baylor still won. So the quarterback position, while it's Blake Shapen's job now, there's still a lot of flux behind him in that there was no experience in Kyron Drones, who's a highly thought of, player, but no real snaps to speak of, in key situations, and then C.J. Rogers, who's a walk-on.
Yeah, I mean, they're low on depth, and that's been, a problem for them, quite frankly, for going on like a decade now. I mean, you really think about it. Seth Russell, go all the way back to him, and the fact that he got hurt and you inevitably got to a point where Chris Johnson gets hurt against Texas and Lynx Hawthorne is playing Wildcat quarterback. And after that, you had the Charlie Brewer years, switched back and forth with Jalen McClendon, kind of, sort of. McClendon was a guy brought in much in the same way as Luke Anthony, except for McClendon was a scholarship guy from NC State who, was not going to start. And so he had, I guess, a connection of some sort with the rule staff at that time, or however that came to be. They brought him on. He didn't play Charlie, or he didn't play much. Charlie ended up, kind of being the guy. But it was always a hold your breath and hope he doesn't get hurt with Charlie Brewer too, and they clearly, didn't have a lot of confidence in the guys behind him at the time. And one of those guys at one point was Gary Bohannon, but he had basically no experience. And then now Bohannon finally has his experience, and he gets hurt and Shapen gets hurt. I mean, it's just been – you really think about all the injuries they've had at quarterback. They've not had just a guy stay healthy for an entire year really at all in the last decade. I mean, barely. I guess all the way back to Bryce Petty would be really the last time you had a guy that he's healthy, he's good to go. And
he missed the game for an injury.
Yeah, he had transverse process.
Yeah, but that wasn't that bad. But, yeah, he was the healthiest one.
Yeah, so, I mean, they're going to have, odds are, just based on history, a guy probably go down at some point, and you can't really bank on that, but you almost can at this stage because of how often it's happened. And so, again, I mean, it was a big topic throughout the spring, what would happen, but I don't know what they could have done differently. I mean, I guess you could have argued to save their depth. They could have just said that Blake and Gary were still neck and neck and they needed to bring him into the fall. But then, Dave Aranda clearly felt like, that wasn't the right thing to do for Gary or Blake personally. And certainly, now if you're looking at trying to build a team throughout the summer, which they're very clearly trying to do because they realize, hey, this isn't last year's team. It's been fun talking about the championships and all that, but that's over with now. That's done. That's months old, and it doesn't have any bearing on who this team is next year because they could just as easily go over as go and repeat what they did. So, you need somebody to come in there and be the leader. And if Gary Bohannon was going to stick around, or if the shoes were reversed and Blake Shapen stuck around to the fall to continue competing, there's nothing preventing the guy who loses out in the fall from still entering the transfer portal, right? So you were kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. I guess if you really wanted to try to rig the system, you would have, I guess, felt like Blake Shapen was a starter. But because you're worried about depth, hold on to Gary Bohannon and just drag him along and then see what's what in the fall. And if nothing's changed, then Gary Bohannon's probably still going to the transfer portal, or you name Gary Bohannon the starter in, mid-August and Blake Shapen's entering the transfer portal. And maybe, just maybe, you get lucky and they both stay throughout another whole season. But I think those odds are very slim, so I don't know really what they could have done differently. What really kind of screwed them was not taking a quarterback in the high school class. Mm-hmm. And I understand why they did that ultimately, but I don't think that just because I understand it means it was necessarily the move that's going to be the right move when all is said and done. I don't know if we'll look back on that and go, that was a mistake. And, they did it for a reason. They just felt like we're not going to, just give somebody a scholarship to get a quarterback in here. You don't want to just have a guy sitting, eating up a scholarship for 4 years just because you needed a depth piece. But, at the same time, yeah, it could come back to haunt them. And clearly in getting Luke Anthony, they feel like they needed a little bit of security, and he may never see the field. Like, that's the thing. Blake Shapen might stay healthy the whole season, but just history says he probably won't. I don't know what this means, if anything. Like, I don't know where Luke Anthony fits in the puzzle. If Shapen goes down, I would think it's Kyron Drones up first.
Yeah.
Like, at what point does, though, Anthony become the guy? Is he ahead of C.J. Rogers? Is he like the fourth guy to call? Is he like the absolute emergency break glass guy? Like, what is he? All we know right now is he's added depth, and he's experienced depth, and they have very little depth and they have very little experience. Even Blake Shapen doesn't have that much experience. So if you're looking at a weak point of Baylor football next year, at its best, Blake Shapen can be a really good quarterback in my opinion, but that's at its best. If anything goes awry, then yeah, there's major question marks that pop up for sure.
Absolutely. And there are coaches that, their recruiting philosophy is a quarterback in every class. But then, you know, they're feeding the transfer portal more than anything, really. Because, again, you only have one of them on the field, but they're...
Like, Jacob Zeno transferred in, like, September last year. Mm-hmm. He saw the writing on the wall of, like, I'm third string, I'm out of here. So, again, that goes back to, I'm sure there's some people, like, and I think I saw one or two comments of, Aranda handled this horribly. Now, look, they got to go get this guy because they ran Gary out. But, again, I'll go back to what I just said. Like, somebody was leaving no matter what. It was just a matter of who and when. Is it going to be Gary Bohannon or Blake Shapen leaving post-spring, or is it Gary Bohannon or Blake Shapen leaving in the fall? Because either way, one of those things was probably going to happen. So I don't think it really made a damn bit of difference, the handling of it. I think that the biggest thing was not taking a high school quarterback, which they had their reasons for doing that. And then, having Jacob Zeno transfer last year right as the season was underway already, that left you in a bit of a pickle. So you may read this as a red flag, Luke Anthony, but I just think it's smart to have another guy in that room that is there in case you need him.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Totally agree with that because again, he's played.
This isn't a guy coming in to be the starter.
No,
I mean, that's the thing. If he was coming in to compete for the starting job, then I think everybody would go, wait a second, like, what the hell is this about? That they just had a quarterback competition. If that was the case, I think people should be really worried about the state of the quarterback spot. But he's not being brought in to start. He's being brought in to help out if they need some help. So I'm not too worried about that. But there's valid questions. And, now they got to worry about their upcoming quarterback class because they've got Austin Novosad who's committed. But he's been steadily stacking up offers, and he's obviously becoming a more and more coveted guy as the quarterback chips kind of fall into place. And here comes Ohio State offering him yesterday. And, I know if that was me, I don't care how much I love a certain school. If Ohio State calls, I'm listening, right? I think anybody in their right mind would. So, it'll be interesting to see kind of how that plays out and who else maybe joins the party and who else maybe garners his interest. But they got to do everything they can to hold on to him because they can ill afford to take some backup option at quarterback after not taking a quarterback last year. I just think that suddenly starts to pile up and becomes an issue to where, depending on how Shapen does, I mean, you might have to go and grab a couple quarterbacks next year. You know what I mean? So that will be interesting to see how the Novosad recruitment plays out. If they can hold on to him, though, that will be a massive win. But, yeah, it's interesting because, we talked to Bryce Petty the other day. I mentioned Zeno transferring, early in the season last year when he saw the writing on the wall and the fact that somebody was transferring out of Bohannon and Shapen anyways, and it just shows you how hard it is to really keep a quarterback room intact these days and how delicate of a situation it can be and how quickly it can turn from a strength into a weakness. And I think right now for Baylor, it's looking a little bit in the middle, and we won't really know much more about that until we finally see them out on the field.
Yep. All right, well.